Demystifying. Welcome everyone. My name is Chris Givens. I am the CEO of Architect and Connected Systems. Also last year was the senior architect of eBay's upgrade project to 2010 and to Fast Search. I'm also on two other big consulting projects which we're also using Fast Search, and hence my interest in Fast Search and helping the community get back a little time and all the things I've learned over the past couple of years with Fast Search. And there's a lot of content today, so I'm going to jump right in. So hopefully everybody can see the slides here. Move on down. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm the CEO of Architect and Connected Systems. We do SharePoint courseware for Microsoft, and one of the courses we built is Fast Search course. Interesting enough, you get in and get into the dirty work, and so I'm going to share a lot of the different slides we've built in that course in this particular session today. I have a lot of different certs. My background is a developer. I do lots of coding. I like to get in and figure out how things work, and so I've done that with Fast. I am originally from Oklahoma, so any of you that are on from Oklahoma, hello. I have worked at Microsoft there in Seattle and a bunch of different other companies there in Seattle. Now I live here in San Diego, so I apologize in advance if you hear any very large jets flying by. I'm next to the Air Force Base, so I apologize in advance for that. My background, I was at IBM. I noticed we have someone on from Avanade, so hello my fellow Avanaders there, but did quite a few things, some of the larger companies out there and consulting engagements. So seen quite a few things over the years. Just again a little bit of things about ACS. Not trying to sell anything. Again, I'm just trying to give you a little information about Fast today, but just to let you know, we do lots and lots of courseware. So with that, what is our agenda today? Well, I want to talk about Fast Search, obviously, and to get a little more deep into what that's going to entail. It's going to be fairly technical. I'm going to do some demos. I do have my environment up. I got a couple different Fast Search environments that I'll run through and show you some things. So you'll get some hands-on movement, not just death by PowerPoint today. So one of the things we're going to look at is the features, some of the high-level features. There's obviously lots and lots of features to Fast, but I'm going to focus on some of the more important, more common ones that people use Fast for. Then talk about installing it. Very simple to install Fast, as we will see. Then the kind of the harder part, what is it with the configuration and architecture that makes Fast so kind of, as I've said, rather difficult for people to grab their minds around. So we're going to demystify that part of it, and hopefully I keep it at a very simple level for you. I'm going to try to do. And then talk a little bit about maintaining Fast. But I also have a couple of examples of things that we did at eBay and what I'm doing at my contract right now of how we're integrating Fast Search into different processes. And so I'll show you those slides. I'll give you a couple little screenshots. I can't show you the environments, but I have some screenshots that kind of pull all the other proprietary info out of there. So with that, we'll go ahead and get in here, and we'll just kind of present this interesting little slide here. Why Fast Search? When you look at organizations that have deployed some type of search platform, whether it's the Google appliance, whether it's Fast Search, whether it's SharePoint Search or Search Express or whatever it is, they can't find anything. It's one of those things where you can go and install Fast, and out of the box, whatever platform, it's going to do what it does. It's going to index things on your network shares, your websites, wherever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be able to find their information. And this is definitely true for the Fast Search side of things. Just installing it, you're still going to have this problem of helping people find things. And so I'm going to point out a couple little areas here, a couple examples of how you can integrate certain processes to make things more findable, things we did at eBay to help users be able to find the information they're looking for. So Fast Search, like I said, even though out of the box, if you just install it, it's not going to solve the problem. It does have the abilities to solve the problem. Who uses Fast Search? Lots of people. I've already mentioned eBay uses it. Dell, Best Buy, Yahoo, they use it internally to index their content. Why do they use it? Well, each company uses Fast Search in a different manner. Some of them, as I said, just real simple. You install it out of the box, you point it at some stuff, and you say index. Great, that gets you to where you need to be. But however, some people go quite a bit farther than that, and they want to go and provide results based off of where a user is located. So if you're in San Diego, you only want to see content that lives here in San Diego, you would see that. Or if you're in a particular department like HR and all you need to see when you go to Fast Search is HR information when you're searching, it would do that, right? So that Fast gives you these abilities to target this data and these results to your users. Now, it's not going to do it out of the box. It definitely requires setup on your part to get those types of features, but it is available in there. So one thing I want to do, I'm going to kind of gauge here out of the attendees we have. I have a little poll, and I'm going to push this out to everybody. And I'm curious to know, how do you use Fast Search today? So we have 4 options on here. You don't use it at all. In other words, you don't have it installed. You may be thinking about installing it, but you don't have it. Or you have it, you haven't really done anything with it. You just installed it, and you haven't customized it in any way. Then there's kind of a third option where, yeah, you went in, you did a little bit of customization, you've done some keywords, you might have thought about touching the directories inside of Fast Search, but you didn't. And then the last one is you really went, you installed it, you've highly customized it, you know what you're doing, you've gone into the directories, you've changed different configuration files. So those are the 4 options here. I apologize if you don't fit any of those, but those are the 4 I thought of here. So if you can kind of fill this in here, give you guys a couple of seconds. And let's see here, we got a pretty good group of people on here, so it should be a good set of results that we'll see. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and push out the results just to see what we've got here. 58% of you, a little more than half, do not use Fast Search today. Another 24%, so about 3/4 of you have kind of just done the basics. And then a slight few have actually done some customization, which I'm very proud of you that have done your customization, and those of you that have highly customized it. Very, very good job. So that gives me an idea of where we are, who I'm talking to, so thank you very much for that. We'll switch back over to the slides here. So obviously some of you are using FAST. Those of you that are not using FAST, I'll go through some of the highlights of the things you can do with it here. I've also got some websites that I'm going to bring up that are using FAST. Our user group here in San Diego, we have everything set up with Fast Search, so I'll show you some demos of kind of how we're using that. So what is FAST? What are some of the things that people want to use FAST for versus going and buying just the regular SharePoint search or Search Server Express or some of those smaller products? When we look at Fast Search, it's highly extensible. So as you just saw in the last poll, I was asking how many of you have actually done some customization to it. And just a few. Right? It's not a lot of documentation out there on the actual customization, how you get a lot of things to work. But there's more and more coming out. So very highly extensible. The ability for you to plug in your own elements for your developer, your IT team, for those of you that are kind of on the user side of things. The IT team can go in and plug things in to enrich the experience with outside data. So if there's data that doesn't exist in a file that you're indexing, but you want to map that file, there's some metadata about that file in that database somewhere, you can do that. You can go in and connect to the database, pull the properties out, and get it into the FAST index so you can later do very advanced searches on those things. The other thing, as I was mentioning, one of the aspects of Fast Search that people really like is this ability to, on the third bullet point here, to do the user context searching. So tailor the results to specific users. Out of the box, SharePoint, it doesn't have the type of configuration that FAST does, but you can make it do some of the things that FAST does. It just requires a lot of coding. But out of the box, FAST has this ability to say, as I was mentioning before, oh, you're in the HR department, you're in the IT department. Therefore, I want to give you results that are in those particular areas. I want to move those up in the results for you. So you see things that are more pertinent to you versus other individuals. And so it's very advanced. You can get it can be very simple. It can be very advanced. It's customizable in that respect, and very powerful. The second one is what's called a ranking profile. And I don't know why they use such an advanced word for sorting, but that's all ranking profiles do, is actually sort the data on a page for results. And so you have the ability to create these ranking profiles that would go and grab properties about a file that you've indexed, or a piece of content that you've indexed. So if you wanted Word docs to be at the top of your results, you could do that. If you wanted PDFs to be at the top, you could do that. So you can actually set it up to have multiple ranking profiles and select it in the drop-down when you do things. Another interesting thing they have is this thing called Visual Best Bets, where when you go and do a search, at the top of the search results, what you would end up seeing is a best bet for the keyword you typed in. In Google, there is a concept of this in Google, only the best bets that show up are actually paid for. Certainly you could do that here in Fast Search. You could charge back if you wanted to for those best bets. No, people don't quite get that advanced with what's going on. One of the other bullet points on here, Office Web Apps. I did a post here on my blog about helping do a migration off of Oracle Portal into SharePoint 2010. And this is the older 10G product. And so one of the things you see, Oracle has a lot of very advanced features to it that kind of blow SharePoint out of the water. But the thing that saves SharePoint in the end of the day is Office Web Apps. The ability to have integration with your Word docs and your PowerPoints in the browser and be able to display those and edit them in the browser is very powerful. And Oracle doesn't have that. One of the things that Fast Search does with integration with Office Web Apps is that when you go and search for these Word docs and these PowerPoints, it actually shows you a thumbnail. In the case of a PowerPoint, it will actually allow you to scroll through those PowerPoints. And so I will show you an example of that as we get into some of the later slides, and I'm doing some demos. The other interesting thing about Fast Search is it has its own query language, and it's a very, very powerful query language. The only drawback, though, about the SQL is that SharePoint doesn't allow you to send SQL queries to the FAST server. I hope that in the future versions that it will allow you to do that, but unfortunately it does not. One of the things that it would let you do, just to give you an example, when you do a keyword search in SharePoint, it actually changes that into SQL and sends it over there, but it's very, very simple. Now, if you were doing a scope, you can actually create these targeted groups of information and content. Let's say all the HR content, you create an HR scope. You can actually go into the scope itself and set a filter that would modify the SQL, but that's nothing you can do through the front-end UI. It has to be done through PowerShell. So I hope one day they kind of change it and make it quite a bit more robust and allow us to send these really complex SQL statements from SharePoint, but right now we're not able to do that. However, if you have other apps that you want to integrate with Fast Search, you can make these queries to Fast Search and send it this fast query language. The other thing that is probably the most advantageous about Fast Search is that it's highly scalable. I can go and add as many servers as I want, break out each of the different processes, each of the roles, onto each of the servers and have a very highly scalable architecture with multiple search nodes, multiple query nodes, multiple document processors, which we'll see we'll have slides for each of the different roles that a server can play. So it's incredibly scalable. SharePoint Search, it's okay, especially the new 2010. If you're not going to get really fancy, you don't have a lot of content, then you can stay with SharePoint Search. But when you get into some really, really big sets of data, then you need to start thinking about going up to Fast Search. And the same thing for if you got a lot of people, a lot of users that are causing a lot of queries. So I'll give you an example. At eBay, 40,000 people. That's a lot of people, soon to be 50, 60,000. You're going to need some pretty beefy servers, and you're going to need a few of them in that search farm to be able to handle the types of queries that will be coming into that and the size of the content. At the company I'm at right now, 4,000 people, you only need a couple of Fast Search servers, but mostly for redundancy, just in case one of them goes down. But in the case that they continue to grow, we can certainly add more servers to the fast search farm and scale it out very, very easily. So there's some of the really high-level features. Now we get into the install portion of it. And I will tell you, installing fast search is the easy part. Installing it just basically installs the binaries. And the default folder is C:/fast search. Now, for those of you that are end users, I know that you're probably not so concerned with the install process. Those of you that are actually going to implement it, you should be. When you do that folder, the C:/fast search, you're going to need to change that. That will be where all of the index files go. And one of the issues we had at eBay is it's real easy to just kind of skip through the install and not realize that, oh, you did not change that from the C volume to the D or the E or whatever you set up. What's going to happen is you'll eventually run out of space on that particular folder, especially if you have a lot of content. This current company that I'm at, they have 350 terabytes of data, and that's a lot of data. And so trying to get that index will create a very, very large set of index files. And you got to make sure you have enough space to be able to handle that. And unfortunately, we found out within the last month that a couple of the places we pointed fast search to index at had a lot of data in it, and we ran out of space on our fast search volume because of that. And so the thing we look at fast search when you do the install, one of the requirements for the actual disks is that they have at least 15,000 IOPS, and so that's a pretty nice set of drives there in some type of drive array. Now, luckily, the company I work at right now, we have a very, very massive drive array system. We're talking about 3 to 4 different racks full of disk drives that can be allocated to our fast search array. Minimum volume IOPS in any of the disk array we have is 45,000 IOPS. So this is a very, very nice box. So you can imagine fast search is running perfectly on that. If you have anything less than 15,000, they'll be very weary. And those of you that, if you're not curious, don't know how to measure your IOPS, there's a tool called SQL.io that you can use to actually figure out what the IOPS are in your volume. Now, that all being said, like I was saying, the install process is very, very simple. You just run through the installs. A couple of other things to note is that everything in fast search is lowercase. Everything's case sensitive, but always make sure that everything is lowercase, including the server names. Server names, and anytime you ever reference a server name, it's a fully qualified domain name. So always keep that in mind. The deployments themselves can be scripted, so if you got to deploy quite a few servers, and you can script that. There's not, at eBay we didn't really script it. You'd have to have a really, really large environment like at Microsoft where you really get into thinking scripting was worth the time and effort. But the install process is very, very simple. A couple of other hints on the install process. The user you're installing, needs to be in administrator groups of the local server. You also need to, there's a group that will get created called Fast Search Administrators. It's very important that when you integrate SharePoint with FAST, normally the FAST server will be on its own set of servers. It's not going to be installed on the SharePoint box, so you'll have 2 separate boxes, hopefully. Exception to that rule would be in development or something. Every service that wants to connect and talk to FAST should likely be in that Fast Search admins group. If it's not, then you're going to see that it can't connect, it can't do different things. So it's very important that you always review what's in that group and make sure the proper users are in there. Now, other thing, daylight savings time. FAST is not very happy about daylight savings time and the dates getting switched, hour back, hour forward. So it's typically good to turn that off when you're doing the install. On all the fast servers, you got to make sure all their clocks are synced, because if not, some of the services can get a little picky. They'll whine a little bit. The IP addresses, you should make sure they're all static, because fast search, the content that gets sent back and forth, it's literally sending your index content in an XML file back and forth between the different servers if you have multiple servers. You want that to be encrypted. You do not want something passing over the network between the servers so that other admins can see stuff, right? So IP addresses should be static. They'll use IPsec to communicate with each other, so it'll keep your content secure. The other thing is the antivirus should not ever be indexing or checking the bin directory and also the directory that has all the index files in it. Obviously, that would not be a good thing. It would spike the processor and cause a few problems. So just a couple of hints there in installation. Now, there's a couple of different types of installation. For those of you that, maybe you're a smaller company or a department, you're just standing up your own fast search server and not really part of IT, it's just you're going rogue or something, you can do a single node install. Very simple. The UI, when you're doing the install and the configuration, you can select single node. It will install everything on a single node, and it will all be up and running. No real hassle about figuring out what kind of configuration you want, what the rows are and the columns are. Very, very simple. That's typically for a very small deployment where you're okay with having to rebuild it or just doing a backup with like a VM or something like that. Or for a development environment where you want to do some testing, you want to do some, as I was mentioning, you can really highly customize this. So if you just have the single server, you're messing around in the file system, changing this, changing that, it's good for a dev server. The other one on the kind of the other end of the spectrum is a multi-node install. And when we start talking about adding more than one server in the farm, things get quite a bit more complicated. Now, complicated is if you've never seen it before. If you've seen it over and over again, you kind of look at it and go, okay, it's a matter of perspective. Everything's relative. You kind of look at it and go, that's not bad anymore. But a multi-node install requires you to at least have an admin server, and then you break out all the other services onto the other boxes that you want. Now, there is a myriad of services out there, and I actually have a slide. We're going to look at every possible service that exists in Fast Search. But some of the examples, query matching, indexing, document item processing, those are all broken into different services that you can allocate across the farm. Now, the most important thing, which you'll see, is the deployment.xml file. You must make sure 100%, and I'll have a slide for this, that file is correct when you're doing the multi-node deployment. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. Ports and firewalls, if you're doing something where the fast search servers are on a different subnet and maybe there's a firewall or router sitting there blocking stuff off, you got to make sure that these ports, if you use the base port of 1300 TCP port, that those ports are open between each of the servers that have those roles. Otherwise, obviously, things are not going to work the way you expect them to. Most people, though, they tend to keep the fast search servers right next to the SharePoint boxes on the same subnet, so you never really have this problem of having to worry about the ports. Now, once you've done the install and you've got your environment up, there are some search folders that get created, the fast search folders. Now, it's definitely, as if you're doing the install as an end user, you're probably not going to be able to see this stuff. But as the installer, you could go in there, look at those folders, I actually encourage you to go look at those folders and see what's inside of there. Now, for those of you that are very familiar with Linux, you will see that those folders are in Linux style. The original Fast Search product was purchased from a company in Norway, and very, very smart people in Norway, by the way. And so that originally was kind of on a Linux platform, and as we'll see in a little while, Fast Search is actually built on Python. And I will jump into some of these folders and as part of the demos a little later. But I definitely highly encourage you, once you've got it installed, to go look at those folders and see what's in there. Now, I'll show you a couple examples of the files that exist in there and some of the customizations I've done as some of the examples here a little bit later on. Here's talking about the different services. Once you've got it installed, you look at all these services. It fires up many, many services, especially if you have a single node box. You'll see all these services running, and you're kind of like, well, what does that do? What does that do? And which one talks to what, and what's the flow of things? And so this gives you kind of a full high-level picture. It has SharePoint on it. It's got your content stores on it. It's got the fast search in there and its different components. It's a really good slide that kind of gives you this real high level. Now, I don't want to focus too much on that because I want to actually get into the demos and things a little later. If we get into the core of what fast is, when we look at the architecture, we see it's a pipeline of things. Each process is talking to the next process in line. So you'll see that we've got these It's hard for me to see this on here, but you can probably see a little bit better than I can. Everything flows through. Each of these boxes here represent an executable, a process that's running somewhere in the Fast Search farm. Each of these can be broken off and stuck on a different server somewhere. So that's the part that gives us the high scalability in Fast Search. And so we will take a look at how do we actually configure those things and how do we get them on the different servers in the farm. And then how we do that is the deployment.xml file. Now, I brought it up a few seconds ago. The deployment XML file, when you're deploying Fast Search, is the single most important file that you must get right. Otherwise, you're going to have a really nasty time later on trying to figure out how do I move this, how do I put this over here. You must get that correct. That is, it's simple XML file, at least relatively speaking, that you build out and you define each of the hosts that will be in your farm, what that host is supposed to be running as far as the services, how many rows of things you have, how many columns. Row would just be a set of servers in your farm. Typically everybody has one row that would be comprised of 2 servers. Now I will jump over, we'll just test this right now as far as my screen share, and we'll go ahead and do a little demo work. Now, one thing I have to tell you, I was not expecting to actually be on a different location today, so my direct link to RDP was not available. So I'm going to have to RDP through 2 different servers to get to the box that I want to show you some of these things on. Now I use AWS, Amazon, to utilize my search services and fire up different images for ACS classes that are hosted around the world. So we got all these wonderful images and things. So I've created this instance called Fast Search. I'm going to jump into that. I also want to point out I'm going to show a couple of things on our SansBug site that you're always welcome to go out and look at that we have Fast Search running on. Now, first things first, let me get in here and show you what a deployment.xml file looks. In the Fast Search server, there's a area in here where it keeps, once you've created your deployment.xml file, it will save it on the admin server for later on people being able to connect to whenever you're adding servers to the farm, it will grab this deployment file and give it to the other servers so they know what roles they're supposed to have. In this particular case, you're going to see that there's only one host in this particular farm, which means that I've set this up as a single node install where it's running the admin service. It's running 4 instances of the document processor. Typically, the document processor, the number of processes you want, will match the number of cores in your CPU. You have a content distributor running, the index dispatcher. We've got a crawler. We've got the web analyzer, search engine, and query is all running on this box. So basically, everything's on here. I got a search cluster that it has 1 row in it. And I got this ID. It's basically I only have 1 server in here. It's indexing and it's search right now. So that's that's a live one for our SansBug site that we have. Or actually, sorry, that's not SansBug. That's the current image that I'm looking at right now. Now this is the thing I'm saying. You must have this correct. This must be perfect when you do your deployment. There was many meetings we had with Microsoft determining what this file needed to look like. We had the Fast Search people look over it a couple different times just to make sure that it was perfect. I'll tell you, I always have someone look at it before I do a deployment just to verify that I didn't mistype something or I didn't put something in the wrong place. Now, this is an example of what I've set up here on this box, but inside Fast Search, there's actually a couple of sample deployment files that they give you out of the box that you can go and look at. So here's an example. They give you a sample multi-1, multi-2, and then a single server farm. So if we open up this multi-1, it gives you an idea of, well, that's not going to work very well. Let's open up my IE here. This gives you an idea of where you'd have at least 2 hosts in this farm. You got this particular server, and you got this server. The first server is hosting the admin component. It's got the document processors running on it. It's got a content distributor. It's got the dispatcher. Right? It's got a lot of these different things running on it. Same thing for this host. It's not running the admin. We don't see the admin on this second host here, but it's also got the processor, distributor, and the search engine, where you'll see that the row and the column defines where in the farm this particular host will exist as far as the search clusters and the rows go. So this is in row 0, column 0. This one's in row 1, column 0. And then we see the configuration here is that the first guy is the primary indexer, and the second one is serving as the secondary indexer. So if the first one goes down, this one will pick up. We see that both of them are doing search. They're both search nodes, so they'll process search requests. Like I said, this can get pretty complicated when setting this up. You can have multiple rows, you can have lots of columns in your search farm, and this really drives your high availability of your farm. So it's always good to know what this needs to look like and draw it out on the board, understand which servers are going to do what roles. So it's a very, very important file. It is the one thing that you got to get right when you're doing the fast search deployment stuff. I have a couple of slides in here, and for the sake of time, I think I'm going to probably jam past these, but I have slides here that show you what each of those nodes in the deployment.xml file do. So in the case of a host element, every server you want to have in the fast search farm must be in there as a host element. As part of that host element, you would then define what roles it's going to have. So is it going to be an admin server? Would it be a document processor? Would it be a content distributor? And I have definitions of each of those. I'm not going to read off the slides. So if you're curious about a particular one, great. I think these slides will be available, for you to look at later. So I give you a little descriptions of each of them. Now, once you have your deployment done, and once that deployment XML file is out there, you've configured the farm, Fast Search is running, you still don't have an integration point between SharePoint and FAST. FAST is its own product. It sits on its own servers. You're not going to install SharePoint on the box that FAST is on. What you're going to have, though, is basically a proxy. You're going to have two service applications that you will create in the SharePoint farm that will know how to talk to FAST. Okay, so there's two of them. There's one that is called the content service application, and the other one is called the query service application. The content service application, what that's going to do, it's going to grab the content. Its job, its responsibility is to get the content from wherever it is. Is it on a file share? Is it in Exchange? Is it in your SharePoint? Is it on a website somewhere? Its role is to get that content and then pass it off to Fast Search, to the content distributor. The content distributor then hands it off to document processors, which turn that content into fast XML and put it in the file system so that when you do a search, you see the results. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, as I was talking, SharePoint does a translation of your keyword search when you type a search in and turns it into SQML, the Fast Search query language, and sends it to the Fast Search server, and which after that, the Fast server returns you the results, and then SharePoint displays those results. Okay, so those two have to be there in order for you to be getting the content out. Now, one thing to note, the communication between SharePoint and FAST really needs to be on a secure port, a secure communication, because again, when that data moves across, it's in XML format. So you don't want people sniffing that traffic and seeing results that the current user can see, but other people should not see. Right? So I do a lot of work for defense contractors here in San Diego, and I'll tell you, there's some things that you just don't let go across the network. So that being said, the communication is done over SSL. When you do the install of FAST, there is an SSL certificate that exists that is used for the actual communication. There's actually a certificate on the SharePoint farm, and there's a certificate for the Fast Search farm. The SharePoint farm needs to know what that Fast Search certificate is. The only drawback about installing FAST is that the certificate itself is valid for 1 year. So if you look at that certificate, likely your Fast Search is not going to be very happy 1 year after you've installed it. So you tend to have to want to go and create another certificate, get it installed, and make sure that it's using that one rather than the one that it actually creates out of the box. So the content processing, kind of talked about it already, but SharePoint, its job is to get the content to FAST. FAST job is actually to process that content. And when the content makes it over, each of those little processes that are running will grab it and do something with it. And so you'll see that there's this pipeline config file that has all these different processor elements that point off to these areas that say, well, whenever something comes in, these are all the tasks that I need you to execute on each piece of content. Now, if you look at it, the name there is actually the name of a Python script that exists in a processors directory that would get executed for each of the things that happen. And you're kind of looking at it saying, really? Python? Yes, Python. If you go and you look in the FAST Search directory under the lib/Python 2.5, you will see each of the scripts that are executed as part of that pipeline. So if you are very familiar with Python and how to compile Python scripts, there's not a lot of documentation on what the inputs and outputs would be for these particular scripts in each case. But if you're very experienced with Python, then you'd be quite a bit ahead from everyone else in figuring out how Fast Search works and how it does what it does. So I'll actually jump in here and go look at these particular directories, just kind of do a demo. So I'm going to jump back over to my sharing. And on the Fast Search server, again here under Fast Search, these are all the directories that get created for Fast Search. Probably one of the most important ones is the bin directory, where all of the different executables exist that make Fast Search do what it does. So when we built the deployment.xml file, each of those elements point to one of these processes that would then get started for each of the hosts in that deployment.xml file. And if we wanted to see what things were running in the Fast Search command prompt, you could actually do a little command here, in control status, and it will show you what services are actually running on the current box you're on. So in this case, I don't have all the services running on this particular one. The way the deployment.xml file, I only made it run the more important ones that I needed. There are some things that come out of the box that you really don't need. One of them is a web crawler. That web crawler is meant to crawl websites. Well, that means that it's going and getting the content. But earlier I said SharePoint's role is to actually go get the content and give it to FAST. So in that case, you wouldn't need that crawler running unless you really wanted to use the FAST crawler to crawl stuff. So there's certain processes that you don't turn on just for the sake of keeping the memory usage low and the CPU low on the Fast Search server. So that's the bin directory. There's other directories I said you kind of look through here. You'll see a very Linux-like path to a lot of these things. In the etc directory, we'll see there's a lot of different config files. I already pointed out the deployment files. But there's also the pipeline config and pipeline extensibility files. If we look at the pipeline config, here's where I was telling you the name of the processor that gets executed whenever content comes in to Fast Search. Right? You could take these out, you could put them in. I don't suggest that, but that's what it tells it what to do. Now the live directory under Python 2.5, you'll see the various Python scripts that implement each of those processors exist right here. And if you sort them by size, you're going to see the ones that are kind of the more important ones that have been created. So doing the tokenization, the limitization, matching, vectors, that type of stuff, those are pretty big Python scripts there that, well, those are the debug files, sorry. But that's what does all the work for Fast Search. All right, so that all being said, let's jump back over to our slides. Get my RDP session going here. Extensibility. So there are some sleeper stages that come out of the box of Fast Search, and so some of those, there's an XML properties mapper. You can actually go and grab XML documents, grab certain elements, do an XPath into that document, and make it a crawled property that gets indexed or turn it into a managed property. You can do an offensive content filter, so bad words, different things, it would actually score them and eliminate content that had these offensive words in them. That's turned off by default. The XML properties is turned off by default. There's a few other things that are turned off that can be enabled. For sake of time, I'm not going to go look at the config file for that. However, I do want to see this thing called pipeline extensibility, which dovetails into one of the demos I want to show you a little later on. You have the ability to point at your own command line tools that you have built that take an input as XML and provide an output that is XML in the fast search pipeline. Not only can you make it an executable, but you can also make it a PowerShell script. So one of the things I've done as part of my extensibility here, sorry, I need to make sure you can see this. I'm going to share my screen again. Jump back over. I'm going to go two RDP sessions deep here, so sorry about that. Hopefully it doesn't have too much of a lag time on it. I have a pipeline extensibility that implements a couple of things. I've got an executable here that takes some inputs and outputs. I tell it what properties I want to be coming in as an input, and I tell it what property I'm going to have coming as an output. I also have the ability here, I have this thing that is very cool. I have a PowerShell script that will do geo-coding, in other words, tagging latitude and longitude, metadata, crawl properties, to my documents. And this is executed as part of the indexing process. And that's what I'm going to show you. This is a very, very cool thing here in a minute or two. So I'm going to jump back here. Very, very extensible. Now, as an end user, obviously you're not going to get to do any of that, but as an implementer, as those of you that are doing the highly customized versions, hopefully you've already seen the power that extensibility gives you. Now, when we look at the architecture, we've installed it, we've configured it, we've got it set up properly. So now what do we do? What are things that are going on that we want to improve the way fast search is doing its thing? Well, whenever we index a particular piece of content, whether it's a web page, a SharePoint item, a file that's on a file share, we are indexing it and getting these properties out of it. So we might grab the title out of a PowerPoint. We might grab the person who created it as a crawled property. Now, those things, they typically, are auto-generated. It knows what it's supposed to do to get these things out of there. However, there are some cases where you may want to add your own crawled properties and inject those. So that pipeline extensibility allows you to do that. But you have to create the crawled property first, and there's a couple ways to do that. The main way is to go into PowerShell on the server and add your crawled property, give it a GUID, define what its type is, what it can be used in. And those choices are important. Deep refiners versus shallow refiners type of stuff determines how kind of big that crawl property will do as far as the index is concerned. Now, these crawl properties, it's basically tagging the data that you're pulling in. They have to, one slide here about crawl properties. One of the crawl properties that Fast Search is really good about is getting the language of your documents out. It can go into the Office document. In the case if it's a Microsoft Office, it looks at the language setting inside the XML that defines that Office doc, and it knows what language it is. It can also go and look at the text of a document and determine if it's French, if it's Russian, and you're able to search based off that. SharePoint Search, not very good at doing that. Fast Search is very good at doing this. So if you're a global company, this is a huge feature that helps you. Now, the thing, once you've got your crawl properties, users can't use them. They can't see them. They don't know what's been crawled. If you want to see it show up in the refiners on the left-hand side, if you want to be able to use it as part of the ranking profiles, which is the sort, you have to make it a managed property. And the managed property is just a pointer to a single or a set of crawled properties. This allows you to do quite a few interesting things when it comes to searching. So one of the things I'm doing as part of my pipeline extensibility for the geocoding, I added two crawled properties called latitude and longitude. But I also have to, if I want to use them in the search UI, I have to add a managed property called latitude longitude that point to my two crawled properties so that I can do things like showing a map where the documents exist. And I'm actually going to show that to you here in a second. Here's just an example of the managed properties. I will kind of skip that for the sake of time here. So I've been talking about a couple of these really cool examples. I have one, and that is using longitude and latitude and adding it to your search results. Now, in my particular example, it's not that fancy. All it's doing is actually randomly generating a latitude and longitude and adding it to each file. Now, obviously, I could go and, based on the content I see, maybe the document has the word Seattle in it, or maybe it has San Diego in it. In that case, I would actually go make a call to Google or Bing and basically be like, well, tell me what the geocode latitude longitude is for San Diego, California. And I would be able to take that and put it in there. But like I said, mine's not that fancy. All it's going to do is actually randomly generate the latitude and longitude. So that actually, I had to create two crawl properties. I had to create the managed properties so that it gets populated. The end result is when I go in and I search for something, I will actually see a silver light. I go, and this is part of a dev thing. You go and do your development. This is your highly customized environment. You create a little silver light control on your page, and when you actually do the search results, you grab that latitude and longitude out of the actual item and have it actually render on the page. So let's look. I actually have this up and running, so I'm going to switch back over to our screen share. And you're not going to be able to see it. You know, it's not live on our SansBug site, but it is a part of our SansBug site. I have a wonderful little customized search center here. And all of our content, as a member of SansBug, I've spoke at the SharePoint conferences, so we have all the slides, and we've got all our slides loaded in here. And I've kind of gone in, as part of my extensibility, I've gone and tagged these with latitude and longitude. And, oh no. Of course, as part of a demo, it decides it doesn't want to load my control. Oh, there we go. Here's where we start to see, I do my regular old keyword search for SharePoint. I see these PowerPoints show up. Here's where we see the Office web apps integration with showing us our thumbnails. If I wanted to do something like preview, I was telling you can scroll through PowerPoints with fast search. And it's running kind of slow here, but you're able to move through and see those PowerPoints without actually opening the document. Now, if I scroll over here a little bit, you'll see that when I extended the fast search pipeline, I was adding latitude and longitude to each of these documents. So when I come over here and highlight over something, it's in a particular region somewhere because it had that latitude and longitude that dynamically added to it. So I can see, oh, maybe I want to see visually where those PowerPoints exist or where they came from. Now, obviously, I don't really want to be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Don't know who was doing that way out there, so that would be good. But that's kind of the power of the extensibility of fast search. Now, I said, you know, what do we use managed metadata for? Well, I had to create that managed metadata in order for those things to show up here on the right-hand side, but also here on the left-hand side, these are the refiners. I cannot use any of the crawled properties until I've made them a managed property as a refiner over here. The other thing about this page, if I wanted to use things as a refiner, when you edit the page, one of the more important things that you have to do is you have to tell the page that the managed property exists. If it doesn't know that it exists, you can't even use it on the page. You can't use it in the refiner. You wouldn't be able to use it here in the Silverlight control. It just wouldn't come over. And I don't know. Yeah, it looks like it's running okay. So this particular search core results, if you look at the properties of that, there's a couple of very important things you have to do here to make these latitude, longitude show up. So under display properties, you'll see this area called fetched properties. And so if we scroll over a little bit, we'll see that I've added, let's see if the XSL editor works a little bit better. No, it doesn't. So there's my longitude that I'm telling it I want it to grab that. I also have the latitude that I'm telling it to grab. There's a few other things that I want it to grab that I've manually added in there. One of the reasons that you can't use the search out-of-the-box search template is because it doesn't have all of the managed properties added in here that FAST knows about. And the same thing, if you have fast here, you can't point at regular SharePoint search. They both error out until you fix this and put the right managed properties in there. So that's one example of how powerful and extensible fast search is. We'll switch back over. We've got a couple more slides. So next thing is the Fast Search Center. I kind of already talked about this. Here's the fast search properties that you have to utilize. You have to add in order to use any of them. Debugging fast search, one of those last things, maybe something's wrong with it, you don't know what's going on. There is a var directory that has a log directory, and for every single process that we saw, each of those executables, there is a directory for it. And logging is turned on at kind of an informational level. You can make it go even farther than that and see all kinds of interesting method calls that are occurring in those directories, and helps you debug what might be occurring if something's not being indexed properly. Bringing it all together, kind of as a pre-summary here, SharePoint, its role is to gather the content and get it to fast search. Fast search will index the content and do its thing. It'll do it as fast as it possibly can, depending on how much robust of the architecture, how many rows and columns you've created. The queries, when you do the queries in SharePoint, it's submitting it to the fast server, and it's getting the results, XML results back, and displaying it to you. Okay? The results are only as good as the query that's been submitted and the data that's been indexed, right, and the properties of the indexing. If I didn't add my particular customization to get latitude and longitude out, you wouldn't have latitude and longitude. Therefore, the search results, if you were really looking for things in India or Europe, you're not going to be able to do that. Okay, so you have to think about what things do you want to expose or get out of your content and add that as a customization in a fast search. Right, so the out-of-the-box settings aren't going to get you to your ultimate goal. You are going to have to do things to get fast to really drive this searchability. What are a couple of things you could do to do that? Metadata columns, the brand new SharePoint 2010 managed metadata. You can actually have defaults added to your content so that when users are creating things get tagged as the business unit they're in, the department they're in, and the geography that they're in. And this is actually really easy to do. It can be a part of site creation. So that's my other example, is you can make fast search quite a bit more robust by integrating into your site creation process. So I got an example for that, but I don't think I'm going to have time, so I'm just going to kind of show you this slide here. The last example, if you're letting users create sites using the out-of-the-box SharePoint UI, you're pretty much doing things really wrong. You do not want them creating things like that. They're just going to keep creating subwebs and subwebs after that. Content's going to get spread all over the place. There's not going to be any real SEO, search engine optimization, things that you'll be able to equate this content to this content over here. It's going to be a mess. What you really want to do is have a very well-defined site creation process where when they go in, and they go and fill out the form. It's a web part, it's InfoPath form, it's an in-text workflow, whatever it is. They're filling out information about that site. And so you'll see here, you could make them select their business unit, their organization, their geography. You can have it do the keyword for that particular site when it's getting created, add it to the fast keywords. So when you're doing a search, if it's the HR's main page and someone types in HR in fast search, they will see, as you can see in this other right-hand graphic, they would see HR. I know it's pretty generic, it says test, but you could have it say HR and it points to the HR site that was created previously. The other thing is that when you're doing this business unit organization geography, you tag that site as those three things, and then all the content inside of that site now has those identifiers to them. So when you go and search in fast search, you make it a crawled property, you make it a managed property, and now on the refiners, you can now go and search for content that is in Asia or is in Australia. You can go and look for things that are as part of eBay or PayPal. You can look at things that are in HR or IT and be able to find the things you want to find. But if you don't integrate that right off the bat, don't expect fast search to give you any type of results back. So I've given you as much as I possibly can here in about an hour, so where can you go to learn other things? Well, as far as books are concerned, this Microsoft book, /O'Reilly, is the newest book, and it is written by a fast master. So Mikkel is awesome. We've had a couple different conversations on Twitter when I was trying to make things do this or that. There are things I didn't know that he knew, things I knew that he didn't know. He is great. I'm not familiar with the other two gentlemen, but I know that if his name is on that book, that is it. That's the new book. That would give you a lot of information. He's a very friendly guy. If you haven't added him to Twitter, he's on there. He's got his own blog. He's blogging very interesting things about fast search all the time. I highly encourage you to pick up that book if you want to learn more. Now, it's going to be a very technical book, so be aware. Then there's the kind of a classic book that's been around for a while that was done by Jeff Fried, and he was originally one of the original members at the FAST company. I forget the name, but he was at the original company and was picked up by Microsoft. Now he works for BA Insight as their CTO. And Natalia, Russian friend of mine, they built this book. There's a couple other people on here, but mainly those two. And that was kind of the classic book that they had. And it's a pretty good high-level view of what you can do with fast search. There's 3 courses you could take. There's 2 of them from Microsoft. There's an application developer course, 10806. You can go take that at any Microsoft Certified Training Center. There's 10802. That's for IT professionals. So if you want to learn how to install and all the quirks of the deployment file, that's that particular course. I believe both of them are 2-day courses. And then ACS, we have a pretty in-depth course that we built for fast search that you're welcome to take. You can purchase that off our site. We have, as you saw, Amazon. I can set you up a fast search instance where you could run through the labs and learn all these interesting things about fast search. So in summary, fast search is awesome. It's wonderful. It's its own monster. You definitely take some care in getting it to do what you want it to do, but once you get it there, it's a beautiful thing. And so kind of got to this point where it was exactly an hour. I do have somewhat of a hard stop here at 11, so I'm not going to be able to take many questions. But what we'll do, if you want to submit your questions in here, I will take them, and then I will try to respond back to you over email. Now, it may take me a while. You'll go into a little queue, but I will make sure that I at least respond to you at some point. So if you have questions, that's my email address. If you want to forward on your stuff, I will make sure to go in here and kind of review them all. My Twitter is GivenCJ, as hopefully you probably saw in the O'Reilly stuff. I appreciate your time today and coming out and learning a little bit of fast search. Again, if there's more you want to know about, email me, let me know. I'm always happy to help out.